There we
I've done
go.
that a few times too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've had some radio magic go down the drain and
Yeah,
just bummed, really bummed. I had Maurice Jones-Drew
right.
on last summer, right before the start of football season. One of my athlete friends who used to play corner on the football team knew him because they played together for Carl Durrell. And he's like, yeah, I think I could get Maurice Jones-Drew on, and he was a sprinter in college. And, it's just high school I don't think he ran in college, but he ran in high school against Reggie Bush. And we had such a great time. And I got up a little early, like 7 o'clock for me is kind of early during the summer.
Yeah.
I just forgot to hit the button, man. And I was so bummed because it was great stuff. But
Yeah.
let me see. Oh, let's get that out of there. How did this come on here? All right. Sorry, I was working on something on CapCut and it popped up on the screen. All right.
No,
Well,
no worries, man.
let's get this rolling. Hey, welcome
Yeah.
to Raise the Bar. This is the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. My name's Troy Haynes. I'm your host, and I'm happy to welcome today Shawn Francis of Team Hoot Pole Vault. How do I get all that right in there, Shawn?
Yeah, no, you nailed it. Team Hoot Pole Vault. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And I was just going to give everybody a little intro there. I came across your stuff through a buddy of mine, Mike Ashton, who is the pole vault coach at Utah Valley. And
Cool.
I just started coaching the vault this year at Vanguard University. I had 1 or 2 years of it in high school. I want to say 3 high school years, but even though I did it in high school, I mean, I understand the vault a little, like this much,
Yeah.
and it's like
It's
just
an
watching
animal.
it going, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here at once. And I was one of those guys who just did it, so it was like, okay, I'm happy to coach guys, but I don't really know what I'm doing. So I started going to Coach Curran, watching
Yep.
him work. And I didn't really ever see many drills because he just had them coming down the runway in waves. And so I would
Yeah.
see that and I had a million questions. And so Mike was, good enough to suggest some drills for me and everything. And one of the things he sent me was doing something on
Oh, that's
YouTube.
awesome.
So yeah, it was
Yeah.
great. And I think the first thing I did of yours was the buying the really soft pole thing, the seven
Oh yeah, the PVC
rows
pipes.
with the PVC pipes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we started doing those and the guys started getting better and it was just great stuff. So
Cool.
it's
No, I appreciate it.
an honor to meet you. And how did you get all started on all this stuff, Shawn?
Yeah, so yeah, we actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. So I made a little bit of a video about this back in October, but it really started when I I hit I was finishing grad school, and all elite pole vault, or not elite pole vaulters, but all pole vaulters or athletes in general have that idea of, do I go get the real job, and start the
Right.
traditional route, or do I go do this track and field thing for a little bit while longer while the window's open? And I
Yeah.
decided to do the window. And in that process, I had this club of kids up in North Dakota State where I went to college,
Hmm.
and I had this massive guilt that I was like leaving this crew to go train back down in Minnesota. So I started these YouTube vlogs back in 2012 just to stay in contact with them.
Right.
And as you probably know, like the track and field and pole vault community is pretty small, so that like
Yeah.
people found some kind of content back then, and they started watching it, and it kind of grew into what it is today, with books and video courses, and trying to just put out information just because
Yeah.
that's what I wanted when I was a kid. But
Right.
that's how it all started. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, so in high school, you were in high school in Minnesota also?
Yep. Hastings,
Okay.
Minnesota.
Hastings, Minnesota. And what was your how did you vault in high school?
Yeah, I was a 15-foot vaulter by my senior year, so like pretty average. I mean, it's a big jump in Minnesota. It was the highest jump in the state that year, but
Uh-huh.
like I mean, I started at 10 feet my freshman year. I think I went 12.6 my sophomore year, then 14 and 15. So it seemed like a pretty gradual from what I'm seeing
Right.
now from a lot of kids. Like nothing special really. I just didn't stop.
Right.
That was kind of
Right.
the magic, is if you go long enough, you get better.
How did that do for you at state in high school?
Yeah, so I got second on misses, so that stung a little bit, but
Yeah.
it kept the fire going. So I kind of went to college with this, um, something to prove kind of a thing.
And that was North
So
Dakota
that's
State?
that's Yep, North Dakota State,
Okay.
NDSU in Fargo.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
how high did you vault while you were there?
So I jumped 520 or 17.1, and then I told myself if I jumped 520, I'd keep going, like just to kind
Hmm.
of see where how high I could jump. And so I did that indoors and outdoors, and then that next year I jumped 540, my first year out of college. So what's that, 17.8 and a half, something like that.
Nice.
And then yeah, and that qualified me for my first US championships, and that threw another bucket of gas on the fire
Right.
to keep
Right.
going. So yeah,
Okay. So
it's been
where
a
did we
ride.
top out at? What's the best ever vault?
Yeah, 18.2 and a half. So 555. So
Outstanding.
yep.
So that
Yeah.
opens up a lot of doors. You got to the U.S. championships. You got to jump against some of the best vaulters in the U.S. And then
Yep.
had what was that experience like? I never got to that level. I got to NC2As once my senior year. Never got to the U.S. championships in anything that big. So
Yeah.
I'm always curious to hear what's like to be at those giant meets.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. I mean, there's a lot of stories. Like one of my first big meets was the Reno Pole Vault Summit, where I got to jump with the elite vaulters. And
Mm-hmm.
um, at that time, YouTube wasn't very big, and there wasn't a lot of videos. So you're seeing whatever you can get your hands on a VHS tape or some DVDs
Right.
someplace.
I remember those
You're
days.
watching
Yeah.
these things. Yeah, and all these guys you're watching trying to jump like them and figure out their technique. You're there in the runway with you, right next to
Right.
you. So there was like Nick Heisong, the Olympic gold medalist in 2000, just right in front of you, and you're going, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, should I even talk to him, or should I
Right.
like, should I even look at him?" So that was kind of surreal, the first few times you go out, and then over time, you just started to realize that they're all just the same guys trying to do the same thing you're doing. They're just trying to get their plan up a little earlier, trying to hit the box a little harder.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I try and tell all these younger kids is they're just trying to solve the same puzzle you are. They're not doing anything else.
Hmm.
They're they're doing the basics, right? It's just faster and on bigger sticks, but everything
Yeah.
else is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So then yeah, you brought up something that's so amazing to me. These last 4 or 5 years, I got started on Instagram. I don't even remember how that all started. I started up this little side training business of mine to avoid doing summer school. So I
Yeah.
got to a place where I hated summer school, and I always loved coaching. So I was like, hey, why don't I see if I can do this during the summer and make the same amount of money and have more fun? And
Yeah.
I would come back because our summers are only 10 weeks long as school teachers. So 6 weeks of summer school, I would come back and I didn't have enough time to detox, from the kids. So I
Yeah.
would be kind of short and snappy. The kids come back and they had the whole summer off and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Haynes, how you doing?" I'm like, "Shut up, sit down, go over there. I'm not ready for you
Right.
yet." And it was way better, doing that. But so anyway, that was the background. But getting started on Instagram, I don't know how I saw it, but just the first couple times I would either see an athlete training, some kind of a coach somewhere, and I'd see some drills, and I was like, I've been around enough long enough to have kind of my own system too, but I always wanted to peek behind the curtain, and
Yeah.
I was late to the game of going to clinics and stuff like that. I don't know if it's ego or what, but I finally started going to some high jump clinics by Doug Nordquist and a couple others, and just sat there and there's a lot of great stuff here, but Doug has stuff on his old thing that's like this old shot of a videotape with grainy this, and now
Yeah.
I've got all this stuff on my phone that's just perfect. I can.
Right.
Somebody showed me how to do a screen recording last year. Barbara, my strong right arm, and she goes, if you can't get it to save or whatever, just play it and record it on your phone. I'm like, you can do
Yeah.
that? And she goes, yeah, just hit this screen recording, but pull this down. So I did that, and I'm like, oh, now everything's perfect on my phone. I can go frame by frame and pick it apart. So it's we're in an amazing age of being able to watch and analyze, and I put things on my golf swing analyzer and start drawing lines and circles and you know putting angles of measurement. And I was telling somebody the only thing I'm missing is a counter. I need because it has it at the bottom. Like if you're scrolling through a video, it'll tell you it's
Yeah,
12 seconds long, right? So as you're
right.
going along, but 12 seconds are seconds. That's a long time. I want to break it down, into either hundredths of a second or milliseconds and go, from the time your foot hits the ground to the time you're doing this is this amount of time. And we want
Right.
to get even that shorter or, whatever it is. So that's my next step. I'm going to keep start asking people if they have anything like that.
So what Pete, do you know who Pete McGinnis is? With the
No.
biomech. So he's the biomechanist for US track and field, and he's
Hmm.
done a lot of biomechanical data, but he uses everything frame by frame to do that.
Right.
So if you just break it into 24 frames per second, you can at least get, you know,
An idea.
24, steps in there. So
Yeah.
that might be a way just to start that. If you use I don't know if CapCut does that. I know you were saying you use that, but I know that Premiere, I forgot what they call it on their app, but the Premiere Pro version of their app, I know does that, where you can cut it frame by frame, which might
Yeah.
get you into those closer to that millisecond.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah,
I'm just curious. Like my brain, I don't know about the way yours works because I see a lot of the mechanics with you. Like I've already been using you as an example for my kids because I preach in the high jump especially. Everything's got to go in order. So I'm like,
yeah,
you're running in a straight line, and then you run a curve. You can't
yeah.
do one before the other. Once you
Right.
get done with a curve, you can take off, but you got to get ready to take off. And then we're going to hit our takeoff mechanics. I said knee drive, arm drive, finish all the way up to toe off, and then you're in flight. And your sport is very similar to mine in that as the better you get, flight gets longer. So I keep
Yep.
telling them the time that you are in the air is the only part of all of this process that gets longer as you get better. I think your
Yeah.
attack speed and everything else in the high jump, now you could argue in the pole vault, you're getting faster too, but the approach itself might be longer to get you more time to do that or whatever. But, the point's still the same for me. It's like, yeah, relatively longer, but not like flight, as a
Right.
percentage. And especially as it's related to improvement and the timing sequence, I'm like, hey, we got to fly. Like when I watch Barshim jumping at 7-Eleven, I'm like, when he takes off, he's got to wait. He's got
Yeah.
to wait for a while before he's going to do anything resembling a layout or, in the pole vault instance, like before you go into your swing or, whatever it is, there's going to be a longer wait in the sequence. So I enjoyed the way you teach that because I'm like, see, there's there's other things just like that. And I know
Yeah.
it sounds silly and most everybody would say, well, everything's got a sequence, but I think these two are the most, in order kinds of things I've seen.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've called it the order of operations, right? The pole vault order of
Hmm.
operations. Kids seem
I
to,
like that.
or vaulters be able to, catch on to that pretty quick. Cause like, oh, I know what happens if I don't do P meds, like
Right.
I'm gonna get the wrong answer. So
Right.
I kind of do the same thing where, hey, if we jump or we try to take off before we plant, I see that a lot happening. Their arms aren't
Hmm.
all the way up, essentially. And then you go, oh, we just have to switch this order. And then instead of them going, oh, I screwed up or this is hard, they go, oh, that's easy. I'm already doing the steps right. I just have to
Right.
flip flop them, and things seem to work out pretty well. But yeah, I like what you were saying about higher flight time. I had a coach one time, and he changed my vocabulary on this. But instead of thinking about adding time, which can feel passive in the pole vault,
Hmm.
especially, think of everything as we're just adding more energy, which is what we want to do because we want to be active in, especially in the pole vault. Because if we're taking any energy out, I always think of it like when the pole bends, we're in a race to be upside down before it starts recoiling. So if
Hmm.
we pause at all, we're just letting our competitor, the pole, essentially catch up, and then we're not going to be able to get in those positions and fly over the bar.
Right.
So if I run into this a lot where a lot of old ways of coaching are like, let's hold this plant position. And then what a kid hears is, I need to be static and just not move and just hold. And what happens is the pole's bending, we added energy into it. Then as it starts to recoil, their their competitors catching up, right? Or the
Right.
pole's moving faster than they are. So instead it's like I want you to add energy and I want you to keep putting pressure on it so we can keep in front of that competitor
Hmm.
so we can, win this race, which we're trying to do. And so that has helped a lot. Just change that. That's about a few years old for me. When just out of college, someone told me that, like, or Steve and Caroline White were like, let's just have no passive phases. Everything's active. How do we
Hmm.
change our vocabulary to be like, adding energy instead of having these pauses in there. And it's been really
Right.
helpful with me and my athletes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep thinking too, yeah, I preach this all the time to him because the high jump's quicker, obviously, and from the time you take off the ground to the time you land. But when you watch it on film, you can see distinct phases still and
Yeah.
sequences that have to happen. So, but I tell them, I go, look, every time the bar goes up, you're gonna have to learn how to wait because
Yeah.
you can't throw your head back into your layout at the same place you did at 5'10, even at 6 feet.
Right.
You're just gonna eventually gonna hit your head on the bar, and you'll learn that that doesn't work. And that's a sequencing thing. But I'm like, it's also kind of a logical thing where I go, if you want to go from being a 5'10 vaulter to a 7 foot vaulter, just picture how much longer it's going to take for you to cover that ground.
Yeah.
That's 1.2 inches of air. Now, in real time, that might not seem like a lot, but it really is. And then I'll tell them too. I said the thing that I remember about adrenaline, and because we're all competitive, and then as the bar goes up and you're going at something you've never gone at before, I don't think there's any one person that goes, I think I'm just going to cruise this one. It's
Right.
like you're
Yeah.
standing there going, hey, this is just pedal to the metal, baby. Let's go. You get excited and you're going down there. And what I've found when I went full juice mode, I had a jump tape that I used to listen to with Van Halen and, it's a Van Halen jump, obviously, and,
Yeah.
and some other things. I love great drum rolls. Those will get me going. So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, then I throw down my headset and I go,
Yeah.
and I'm running. And it's like at that point, I was all adrenaline. There was no thinking involved. And it's almost like trusting that everything's going to work out. And what I found many times was I would do the same thing the kids were doing. The first time I jumped I just think I was jumping at 225 at the Coliseum and 7'4.5". I'd only tried it a couple times and I was going so fast. I was having such a good day. I think had two really good jumps in a row, like boom, boom, make. I'm fresh. I opened high, and then here I am at 4.5, and I was like, "This is it, baby. Let's go." I tried this just a week ago, and I got it now. And I was so fast that my brain sped up too, and I threw my head back immediately, like I wasn't even off the ground yet,
Yeah.
And I'm realizing, the speed is good. We need the speed, but paradoxically, as the bar goes up, everything's got to stretch out.
Right.
It's like time dilates the other way, and I've kind of put that into my mind as almost like being in the zone.
Yeah.
You're playing basketball one day with even just pickup with your friends, and you hit your first 3 shots in a row. And you're kind of starting to go unconscious, and you do your heat check. You take one from even farther out, and
Yeah.
that's good. And you're like, okay, it's kind of weird, but I've heard that talked about before. Everybody goes, yeah, when you're really playing well, everything slows down,
Right.
instead of speeds up. You're not like hyper aware. You're just kind of like, oh, this is easy. Oh, that guy's covered. You watch Brady. He's like, first guy's covered. The ball's already moving out of his hands to hit the back and the flat, just,
Yeah.
and it's like, cause he knows the guy's there. He can almost feel him, and it's like, all those things play out. So it's like the sequencing and then the waiting, the patience. It's interesting to me how you have to learn how to deal with different brain states, if that makes
Right.
sense.
For sure. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. It's really fun actually hearing the other side of like high jump versus pole vault,
Mm-hmm.
because like yeah, there is that on your side where yeah, we need the speed until we're in the air, right? But then
Yeah.
everything or correct me if I'm wrong because you're the high
No,
jump expert here, but
absolutely.
yeah, once you're in the air, then it's like then that's where that patience has to come in, or else if you rush it like you had all that energy on the ground, your bar's gonna
Yeah,
fall down, right? Wrong answer.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, those flow states are interesting. I don't know if you know, but the other thing I do is I run this mental health advocacy organization.
Yeah. I
So
saw
I'm
that on
really
your
interested,
bio. Yeah.
yeah, and what the mind is doing and stuff. But I had a guy just recently tell me that flow states a big chunk of why that slowing down happens is because you're taking in more information, and so when you have more information, it takes longer to process. So time dilation slows down and allows you to see things clearer
Mm-hmm.
because one, you have more information, and then you have this perception of time slowing down so you can interact with the world in a slower way, which is kind of a cool
Right.
way of thinking about that. It's almost like shooting in 120 frames per second versus
Mm-hmm.
24 frames per second. you know.
Right, right. There's more things actually going on, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. Because I've told, my kids sometimes, I'm like, hey, I want you to, when you hit your takeoff, if we're leaning better, you're going to buy yourself more time. And I said, and while you're up in the air, you can be in your layout and you be like, hey, mom, look,
Yeah.
like not like, boom, boom, boom. It's like that jump, referring back to that jump that I took at the Coliseum. I remember taking off and I remember hitting the mat and going, what happened? I mean, there was no awareness of anything. It was
Yeah.
so fast that it sped up the other way. It was like instead of dilating, it just went and everything went down to like a half a second and was done.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And I remember Dwight Stones came walking by me because he was doing the prime ticket. It was us versus SC, and it was at the Coliseum, which was really cool. It was only a couple of years after the games. This is 1986, so the Coliseum was all tarted up. It was really nice.
Yeah.
And he was doing the telecast, I think, and it had to be why he was there. And he came walking by after my first jump, and he said, I'll never forget, because I don't never really get a chance to talk to Dwight much, but he said, Troy, you're going too fast. That's all he said.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I was still in the wrong state of mind even to take what he said. I can hear it now.
Yeah.
30 years of experience now. It makes perfect sense. At the time, I was like, what do you mean I'm going too fast? I need to go this fast. The bar went up. And I was
Yeah.
already in that frantic, hamster on a wheel thing in my head. I was like, it was spiraling out of control the wrong way. It was too bad.
So
But
where do you find like in your past competition, where was your optimal arousal level? Like where did you compete your best?
that's a great question. I think, as a competitor, bigger meets were always kind of that way. I mean, they just kind of got you focused. It's hard to get fired up a lot of times for maybe just a dual meet, or, once you got towards the end of the season, for us, it was Pac-10s. And then that one year was NC2As. I remember high school, it was all about CIF out here in California. It's called, California Interscholastic Federation, blah, blah, blah. But it's basically just league championships and then the next couple steps. Everybody's got them, regionals, this, whatever you got to go through. California is a huge state, so they kept us in the South separate from the guys in the North, and blah blah blah. But as far as arousal goes, I think I would say it'd have to be pretty peppy. I've been noticing recently that a lot of the athletes that I work with, and I probably work with high schoolers more than anything else. I have my share, a few elites. I have some younger kids, that are in grade school or seventh and eighth graders. But um, the high school kids are so chummy now. They all hang out. They're all talking. I remember when I used to show up to the meets, I would walk in, and here I'm talking about the big invitationals, right? You get a chance to see all the names in the paper. When I was a kid, it tells you how old I am, Shawn, but when I was a kid, the names were in the paper. We used to read the newspaper and see the meet results the next day, and you'd be looking for the marks. You say,
Yeah.
oh, look, this dude jumped 6'8", or this guy jumped 6'9". And I remember there was a guy named Francel Jones who was a free safety like me in football and had jumped 6'10" as a junior. And that whole senior year, man, I had my eye on Francel every week. Like, what did Francel do? And we'd be getting to the big meets like Mount Sac or Arcadia, and looking for those. And those guys, when we walked up, we'd kind of do that. Hey, man, what's up? And you'd catch up. But man, once it was time to go, we weren't sitting there hamming it up. I was sitting there on my towel, waiting for my turn, just making sure I was in the right order, and I didn't sit around too long. Like, I'd already learned I couldn't sit,
Yeah.
too long. I had to keep up and keep moving. So, those little things, the non-chumminess, I don't know, maybe it was part of my football background
Yeah.
that
That
might have
makes sense.
helped with intensity as far as that goes. It might help a little bit. Like maybe a swimmer or something. I don't know. Maybe certain other sports maybe it'd be different. I don't want to disparage swimmers. I don't know how they think when they're getting fired up for meets, but football has an intensity to it for sure. But yeah, I think that always helped. I seem to be okay at big meets. Like I did my share of decent competing at big meets. I don't know. I've never really thought about that before, Shawn. That's a good question. I'm trying to think, what is optimal like?
Yeah, because it
Or-
sounds like that Coliseum meet, it was almost like too much, right? Where
Right,
everything's
right,
sped up, the performances, like you might have been running fast, but the bar wasn't staying up, right?
right,
But
right.
at these lower meets, like you didn't have the pop or the intensity or the adrenaline to, take it to
Yeah,
that next level. So I'm just curious. I wonder where like that middle
yeah.
phase was for you.
Me too. I remember I was experimenting a lot with the adrenaline part because I got to that point where I was looking for that the next level thing. It's like you lift hard and you do all your explosive training and plyos and you're fast and explosive and 54-inch box jumps, 60-inch box jumps. I mean, I could
Yeah.
jump. That was no problem. It was just, you know, and there's so many little pieces to it, but it's like part of that was just like, hey, maybe if I just get really amped,
Yeah.
like hyper amped, and that's why I was trying to do that with some, and sometimes I think I needed that more than others. But I don't remember doing that all the time either, even towards the end. And here I'm thinking about post UCLA, but that was a short time too. One thing I was well, you brought it up before, not to get off the subject. I
No,
don't think I have
whatever.
the right answer for you,
Yeah.
but you were talking about the similarities between the two. Now that I'm and believe me, a real basics in the pole vault coaching, but I've noticed so many parallels. I keep bringing them
Yeah.
up to the kids between the high jump and the pole vault. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's some real simple things here. From not throwing your head back and cranking back
Yeah.
on the pole, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I go, there's some real similarities there. So, um, did you ever do anything besides pole vault? Did they ever ask you
Yeah.
to try anything else?
In high school, I was a 110 hurdle guy. I mean, they threw
Mhm.
me in the 300s too, but man, those are not fun at all. I don't consider myself a 300
Right,
hurdler or farther than that. I did the high jump maybe at 2 meets. I think I jumped 6 feet or something like
Mhm.
that. And then they were like, "Oh man, I think I missed." Mike, again, I'm not a high jump guy at all, but I took off too close to the mat and almost missed all the mats, as
Right.
I cleared the bar. And they were like, yeah, maybe we should just stick with you in the pole vault after that. Like you're jumping high, but I don't know if the injuries are worth it or trying to
Right.
figure this event out. Um,
Crazier that the pole vault would be less risky than the high jump.
yeah, at that time, it totally was, man. Um, yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up those. What have you found the parallels besides like throwing your head back or I mean, the
Oh, for
stepping is
me,
a little
riding the
different.
knee. Okay, for
Okay.
me in the high jump, I've equated that knee ride, and there's a few people that get away with almost none that I've seen, but they're exceptional. Most of the guys that I've seen, Stefan Holm, who's jumped 711 and a half, Barshim, when they drive their knee up and their arms are up here, the arms usually will start to drop because once you get off the ground, the high jump, I teach my kids that I want you to go from tall to small. So I want you to get as tall as you can at takeoff with as high a center of mass, explosive knee drive up and hands up. And then once that toe leaves the ground, the game's going to change. It doesn't have to change immediately, but it needs to change quickly. So your hands are going to come down. They're either going to sit on top of your hips, or one can reach for one foot, and the backside arm tends to just drop on the hips anyway. But your knees will come up. So from your when you're standing, like I'm 6'3", I put my arms up, I've got to be 7 feet ish,
Yeah.
or more. But once my arms drop, I'm back to 6'3". Once my knees bend, I always show them I go from tall, then I drop my arms, and then I sit on my knees, and then I throw my head back. And I'm not very flexible, but I can't get my head back towards my feet like I used to. But
Yeah.
I'm like, you're getting into a smaller little ball that's going to spin. You're
Right.
going to try to rotate over the bar at the top, and you can't do that if you're long. You
Right.
don't spin very quickly or at all with those out. So, but the first part of that is the knee drive's got to stay up, in my estimation, because when I drive it back down early, if I punch the hip earlier, if I just drop the knee, I'm actually lowering my center of mass a little bit
Right.
in the air. A lot of people would argue. I think a lot of physics guys would go, well, it's probably not significant, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I don't want to be lowering anything,
Right.
as I'm trying to go higher.
Yeah,
I want to
exactly.
keep everything up. So I leave that knee up. I tell them to leave their knee drive up like it's the button on the elevator. Whatever floor you want to get off, I go, if you want to get off at 7 feet, then you better ride that knee all the way up to 7 feet, and then you can do your layup. So
Yeah,
that's the one
that's
thing I've seen with the vault. When you drive that knee through, bang, and like you're saying, stay in that position, that reverse C. where that back leg is just waiting to swing. I'm like,
Yeah.
you don't have to rush that. You don't want to rush that, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting you say that. When I was in grad school, I got to read all the pole vault research that was out in the last 40, 50 years,
Hmm.
which I'll tell you, there was a lot in the 80s and early 90s,
Yeah.
and then it kind of stopped, But
Right.
the big one I took away was that the long jump up, or the long jump takeoff and the pole vault takeoff are almost identical.
Right.
So those drills could be interrelated in so many different ways, which I don't see a lot of pole vault coaches taking advantage of that, going, "Hey, let's just
Hmm.
throw them with the long jumpers for
Right.
one day a week or something just to get their takeoff good." That's your pole vault
Yeah.
practice. Say we're gonna go with the long jumpers, and which is fascinating because when I was trying to learn the event a long time ago, there was a lot of this jump up over the bar. But
Hmm.
what really we want to see is like an 18-degree takeoff angle, which is relatively low if you look at the degrees. And
Yes.
so I mean, as soon as I started constantly preaching, I want you to try and long jump over the pole vault pit, then people were
Yeah.
like, oh, well, that makes sense. And then they're going, and I'm adding more energy into the pole because I'm trying
Right.
to go deeper into the pit. And what happens is like the pole will, if you're on a small enough pole, you'll keep going that way. But if you get on the right pole, it'll go, nope, we're going up now. And then
Yeah.
guy
Right.
rocketing to the moon. So, but yeah, that knee drive is huge, especially pointing the vaulter where you want him to go. So, I've always kind of coached in the pole vault or even long jump. I want you to go that way, high in that way, and it seems
Yeah.
to work really well
18
for sure.
degrees. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's neat that you say that too, because I think for flight angles, you always hear different things. I'm like, well, but to me, it seems like for the shot, shouldn't it be 45? Like perfect projectile launch angle, And
yeah,
I have never done any research on shot or disc or hammer or the weighted throw, none of those. Javelin, I know the javelin's a different beast because of the aerodynamics of it, and
right.
when I was in college, the Krausers were throwing over 300, and one guy, I don't know, it was Petronov or I think there's some guy, somebody across the pond threw like 330 or something, and they just said
Jeez.
they had to change the handle. They're
Yeah,
like, somebody's going to get killed out here because these guys are really throwing it.
you're gonna throw it into the stands pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, they were figuring out how to hit that perfect angle where it was like an airplane wing and it would just keep going,
Yeah,
So they changed the handle weight, and they've done that a couple times because every time they figure it out, they just keep putting it. I think they move it forward. I think they keep
it's
moving the
it's
handle
wild.
forward. I don't know. Maybe the other way. But anyway, um, so yeah, flight angles, takeoff angles. When if you're working with, say you're recruiting Walter, Shawn, and you're still you're at one of the colleges coaching, or are you still
No,
doing,
so
now you're just
I
working individuals?
yeah, so I stopped. When was I stopped coaching like at a high school or college in 2014, and then have been running, camps throughout the country ever since, and
Hmm.
doing this online stuff. So I do a lot of online reviews, or if people want consultations, or if they want to have me come into, their school for a day a week, whatever it could be, or run a camp. I
Yeah.
kind of do that now. But I figured I'd have a bigger impact this way if I could put more information online where more people could see it than if I worked with
Hmm.
the same 8 to 10 kids, for a year.
Right.
So that was
Right.
kind of the decision with that. But
I like that. I like that.
yeah,
I've been toying with that idea for a while, both actually until you just said it, I hadn't thought of it at a domestic level. I was thinking international. I'm like, I would love to take sky iron fly jump camps and go to India. I've had
yeah,
so many athletes from India that are saying, "Help, please. We don't have
yeah,
any coaching, and they don't even have any money. They don't have any shoes. They're jumping off dirt, and landing in these
right,
pits." And I'm like, "Yeah, it'd be great. Go over there and do a week, and
totally.
go to these different places." So that's a great idea. If you are going to recruit a pole vaulter, what uh, other than speed, which is kind of obvious, what are some of the athlete types, or what types of kids do you think make pole vaulters? Because I have my personal observations after a short amount of time, and craziness is at the top of the list.
Yeah,
I keep telling her, I tell my high jumpers, I go, you guys are pretty much daredevils. You don't realize it because you're in one of the more, sports where if you mess up, you could get hurt. But I
yeah.
go, those pole vaulters now, they're crazy. So
Right.
is that at the top of the list, or how does it work with pole vaulters?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is a little different now. I really believe anyone can be a pole vaulter. You know, if
Hmm.
and I have this joke. I wrote it in my book too. Is like if you can land in the pit and you don't die, you're an official pole vaulter for life. Like it
Right.
doesn't take much. And I get a lot of masters athletes reaching out who is like, I wanted to try this when I was a kid, especially females, which is cool because um, uh, the female pole vaulting really hasn't been along very long. I
Right.
think it was
Right.
Sydney was the very first Olympics that they
Hmm.
had it.
Yeah.
And in the grand scheme of things, you're like, man, a lot of people show up to watch the women jump before the guys sometimes, you know.
Right.
So the popularity kind of shifted. But so I personally try and turn everyone into a pole vaulter. Now, in terms of jumping high, um, yeah, you need a little bit of daredevil. You need a little bit of that gymnastics, kind of like to be upside down and try
Right.
weird positions
Hmm.
and things. I always say I'm looking for a kid who can fail 3 times in a row and still want to keep trying it. You know, that's
Right.
always a big one.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, if you take speed out of it, it's really hard because you want to be taller if you're not fast, right? Because your levels are going to be easier. It's going to help a
Right.
little bit. But
Right.
we've also seen Renaud Lavillenie break the world record a few years ago before Mondo was on the scene, and he's a pretty short guy. Like I jumped against him at some of these meets, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
well, you really aren't that tall. You're just really fast and elastic. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, taking speed out of it is a tough one because you go, well, what would make a good pole vaulter if they're not fast? You know,
Yeah.
so longer levers obviously, and a little bit of that. Like I kind of want to jump out of a plane,
Hmm.
just see what it's like. But yeah, the
Yeah.
mentality is a huge one, especially in our sport where I don't think you really ever solve it, and it might be true for the high jump as well. Like there's always something you can learn,
Yeah.
including like Mono Duplantis right now. Like I've talked to him a bunch when he was a kid, and his dad talks to me every once in a while too. But they're always like, I mean, he broke the world record, but if we would have done this, he probably would have been able to jump higher. Or
Yeah.
if we could have gotten a little bit bigger pole, he could have jumped
Right.
higher. And it's one of those things you never solve. So I would look for a kid who is comfortable with the process and just
Yeah.
wants to, not necessarily, I want to be a gold medalist, I want to be this, I want to be that, which is a cool thing to aim for. But this sport's all about the process and just seeing how high you can jump. So if you can
Yeah.
have that mentality with some levers and some daredevil
Yeah.
dynamics behind it. That's kind of
Well,
what I'm
it's
looking
it's
for.
funny too. You're talking about different camps of thought. Like I've listened to Curran, and I know Coach Curran. I proudly call him my mentor at UCLA. I've kind of
Yeah,
modeled a lot of my business stuff after his business model with the kids and everything. And he's hilarious. He's just like you.
yeah, he's awesome.
He's like, I mean, when he's with the kids, it's so funny. He's, hey, you do this, do that. And they come and he's like, and have a nice flight. and,
Yeah,
and he pushes them into the pit. A lot of time he gets that hand on them and shoves them in there. Have a nice flight. And so I love that part. But the what I've noticed for a high jump is I tell the kids, I go, look, I don't have a Haynes system of what's going to work for you. I said, I've got a lot of things that I've tried and everybody's different. So, like for arms at takeoff is huge. I can think of 5 different styles with sub styles of each one that I've seen. And I'll usually say, if I've seen somebody jump pretty high doing that, it makes it viable. You know what I mean?
right,
Just because I didn't do that and I couldn't make that work when I tried it doesn't mean that you can't.
right.
So I've categorized, 2 arms up, 1 arm up, other arm up, like Fosbury, like all these different gradations in between. So I see this wide variation there. Knee drive's one of the few universals that covers all of them for me.
Hmm.
Um, but that's one thing. I'm wondering, what are the different camps in the pole vault? Because I know not everybody believes in, say, I've seen a lot of my guys are having collapsing, if I'm a left footer, a collapsing arm problem where
Yeah,
they eat the pole right away, and then maybe they can extend it back off of them, or maybe they can't, but I'm like, shouldn't this be, and so when I listened to guys talk, I was talking with Greg Stull, who was one of Curran's vaulters when I was at UCLA. Curran was a rookie coach my freshman year, which was Interesting. So I've known him for a
Yeah,
long time and,
that's
and got to
awesome.
listen to him. I used to hang out because I loved the pole vault. I did it a little bit in high school, and I would watch these guys that were vaulting 4 or 5 feet higher than I ever did in high school.
Yeah,
And they weren't asking me to do it, of course. So I was like, I'm watching, but I was always listening. I listened to him. I listened to Art Venegas, who was one of the best throwing coaches in the world, and had John Brenner there at the time, who was, we were thinking he was going to go to the Olympics in '84, and I listened to these high level coaches, and I was had that mind. I didn't realize then it was going to be a coaching mind, but I was always looking for anything,
yeah,
like how does this event work? Where are they getting their power? And so all those kinds of things. But I remember with Curran, I could have sworn it was, almost like lock this thing out and
yeah,
hit and then come back. And then I hear different things. Like Greg was telling me this week that he thinks there was something that he was talking about between that upper hand getting all the way up and hitting here. And he just like, what was he talking about? He was talking about the third step out of four. Like if you went left, right, wait, right, left, right on the right foot, he was already here. And he
yeah.
goes, and then we're going to really bend the pole. He was talking about this new research that he'd looked at. And I was like, all right, I gotta come see you do your stuff. Cause he's got a good kid vaulting there at Chapman College. I was watching him and he's sound. Greg was a good vaulter in college. I knew then. So, and he's been doing his craft for a while. So it's just anyway, back to the question. What are some of those camps? Like you're talking about these guys arguing back and forth.
Yeah.
Are there two big main camps or there
Th
more?
there seems to be a bunch of it's changed over the years. So when I grew up, well, so this is the easiest way to say this is there's more than one way to pole vault, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
I literally wrote it on the cover of my book because it was like that was the aha moment I had when
Mm-hmm.
coaching or trying to figure out the sport was because when I grew up, it was the Russian model because Sergei Bubka had the world record for 20 years, and they're like,
Right.
no one's beat him. That's the way. We have to jump the Russian model. And the only other book out at that time that was readily available was Beginner to Bubka, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. I mean, if you're reading a book with the guy's name on it, you're gonna
Yeah.
probably jump like that guy. Um, and this, I'll tell you a story I heard in college that will help with this a whole bunch. But my favorite pole vaulter in high school was Toby Stevenson. He was this guy who wore a helmet, and they called him Crash Stevenson because he was just aggressive and wild, and he would do these really fun celebrations when he get in the pit. Like I don't know if you've seen Happy Gilmore. They would do the
Yeah.
riding the bull. He would
Yeah.
grab the pole and ride the pole afterwards.
A
Um,
showman. I like it.
yeah, he was a showman. And he was fun. And so for a high school kid, you're like, oh, that looks like pole. That's what it
Uh-huh.
should feel like. And Facebook was pretty new at the time. And so before you could, follow somebody, you just go, I wonder if what's on their page. You could start you feel like a creep in a way. But I went
Right.
to Toby Stevenson's page and he posted a video of him jumping. He was a 6 meter jumper, which is the legendary status in our sport. If you jump
Mm-hmm.
6 meters, you're a legend. He jumped six
Right.
meters the year before, won an Olympic silver medalist that same year. And then the following year, I think he jumped 19 something. And somebody wrote on his Facebook page, you would jump higher if you followed the Bubka Petrov model.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of had this like, well, maybe he would have, like everything's saying if you jump this way, you'll jump higher. And his response just changed my perspective on this. He goes, models only work for the people they're named after. And I went, oh, snap. All
Right.
right. So if Toby tried to jump like Bubka, which I'm sure he's tried to because everyone's going, I'm
Sure.
going to try and jump as high as I can, he probably would have jumped lower. So he had to develop the Toby Stevenson model to jump really
Right.
high.
Right.
And that's where my whole perspective started changing. We're going, oh, shoot, there isn't a model. And some of these models might work for specific groups of people or certain
Mm-hmm.
kids, but I'm just going to collect as many tools as I can from all of these different places. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
have a kid or a vaulter or myself, even because I was experimenting on myself, going, what tools work the best for this style of jump?
Right.
And Renaud Lavillenie, again, if I'm bringing him up again, he he doesn't lift a ton of weights at all. When talking to him and his coach, what he did a lot was he's really elastic and he's really fast. So his coach was saying, like, we want to focus on his strengths instead of his weaknesses, because
Hmm.
if we focus on his weaknesses, it might kill his strengths. So
Right.
if we make him stronger, he might get tighter and not be as elastic and
Right.
bouncy on the pole, kind of a thing. So to answer your question, this is a long way of saying there are some universal truths though, like you need to be the fastest you can at the end of the box, like
Right.
attacking the box. You want your plant as tall as you can before the pole hits the back of the box. Um, that plant situation, what I've kind of found is you just want elasticity and you want body positionings moving forward.
Hmm.
So if you have a big bottom arm, but it's preventing the swing, that probably won't work very well. But
Right.
if I remember correctly, watching Kern, what he does is he hits that arm, but he pushes it above the head. So there is that elasticity part.
Hmm.
Other people do it like this, where there's still elasticity in the chest. So the
Right.
elasticity is the common component. It's just how do you get that is the trick based on, or I want to even call it a trick, whatever tool you need to do to be able to give the vaulter to be able to have that elasticity. If
Right.
they're too blocked out, they might throw back. If they're not blocked out again, they might get thrown back.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so the plant can get a little tricky. Same with knee drives and things like that. The tuck and shooters is another big one I get all the time. Should I tuck and shoot or should I have a long trail leg? Back in my
Right.
day, it was if you pulled your knee up at all, it's bad, really, really
Right.
bad. If you look at the world record holder now, or Sam Kendricks, or these other world champions, they're all tuck and shooters. So you go, well,
Yeah.
what's the commonality? And if you watch, they keep their legs straight until their pole or their toe is pointing at the box.
Hmm.
So if you think of like a bow and arrow, if you turn the pole into a bow and arrow, you're turning your body into the string, right?
Right.
So as soon
Right.
as you pass that string, then you're not adding any more energy in that plane anymore, and you're free to pull your knee up, which will help
Okay.
get your hips up faster, but you can lose some energy that way because you're taking force away from the
Right.
swing. So you just have to figure out, is this vaulter strong enough to have a longer swing? If they're not, maybe we tuck and shoot. Does the tuck
Yeah.
and shoot help them get into positions better to be able to do the third, fourth, fifth, sixth phase of the
Right.
jump or
Right.
not? And so I've kind of looked at it that way. And so, yeah, there's only a handful of universal physics truths in our sport, but everything else is just a way to be able to do that based on the physics the athlete has at their
Right.
disposal. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a really long answer. I'm
No,
sorry about that.
the main things that I were thinking of were both, plant, and hearing you describe the differences there is helpful. And then that to me, the classic one has got to be the one you said last, the either long swing
Yeah,
up into that, and it's easier for me to see because I'm used to things that happen quickly that I'm not crazy about. So like,
yeah.
and the I was trained by a guy named Baru Elias at Long Beach City College, who he had a couple 7-8 guys in his stable, one of whom went to Korea in '88 to Seoul. Brian Stanton, 7-8 jumper, Dennis Lewis, 7-8 jumper. He had multiple 25 and 26-foot long jumpers and 54-foot triple. I mean, he always solid in all of those. And Long Beach
Wow.
City used to dominate the state JCs out here. Lots of titles up on the wall there when I went to train with him. And
Yeah,
he was big on cycling. What I've learned, you know, knees up, feet to your butt. And I apply that. I believe in that so strongly that I think it applies to everything. So from running down the
yeah,
pole vault runway, javelin, long jump, triple jump, high jump, anything sprinting, obviously, hurdles. I'm like, if you're not cycling, to me, you're just either
yeah,
lazy or you like running low to the ground,
yeah,
one of the, but it's
yeah.
like you gotta cycle, right? So I see that, and then I'm like, that into the takeoff, like you're saying, speed is important. And I'd say I even tell my athletes even more important is acceleration.
For
Like
sure.
whatever
Yeah,
if we can, it would be ideal to be continuing to accelerate all the way through. Now, some might argue as long as you're going fast and you're not decelerating, I mean, technically you could be decelerating from faster than anybody's ever run and then still be plenty
yeah,
fast at the takeoff. So, but for me, logically, dealing with human beings, I'm like, well, let's try to accelerate up to where we're right at the fastest we can possibly be as we're doing whatever that is, from
right.
throwing a javelin to vaulting to long jump, high jump, whatever. And so when I see something that goes small, and usually when I see the cycling stop or drop, then I think it had to be deceleration and it had to be a drop. And none of those things are any good. Like you're talking about, it's better to have, if you had two things being equal, if you had two guys at the same speed, right? And same strength, let's say whatever, and one guy's taller and one guy's shorter, depending on body types and whatever. See, it's so
It
variable.
gets weird. There's too many
It
variables,
really
right?
does get
Yeah.
variable. But you would, like you said, you'd like to get somebody taller, right? Ideally, because they have a mechanical advantage. You're like, well, maybe they don't run as fast, and maybe they're not as gymnastic or whatever, too. So
Yep.
you got those arguments going against you. So, but that did crystallize it for me because I can see how people can be, in those two respects. You're like you said, those two ways that work, obviously,
Yep.
and which one do you pick? And like we were talking about before with my arm styles things, it's like I've gotten to a place where I need to wait and watch more when people come to me and say, okay, we just started jumping a week ago. My daughter jumped 4.6 at her first meet in the varsity, and they love her, but they don't have a coach. I'm like, that's why I have my business.
Yeah.
So they come see me, and I'm watching them jump, and I'm just like, within a couple jumps, I'm going, oh yeah, great flexibility, nice layout, and doesn't use her arms that well yet, but we can find something there, and um, but I don't like to, like I said, go. And I did this for years. I used to say, hey,
Yeah.
when I jumped, I was a classic double arm gather. I'd be running and I'd bring both arms up, reach back, bam, and I could teach that because that's what I knew, and
Right.
I
Yep.
I tried a single arm, when the Europeans were just starting to do the single, and I couldn't get off the ground doing that. And I would demonstrate, for the kids. I go, yeah, Fosbury did the opposite. He would go single arm but reverse, like he was long jumping or something. And I go, and I could get no air doing
Yeah.
that. And my personal thought on that was you have to be a real stick. And I call sticks the tall, skinny kids. I'm
Yeah.
like, because Fosbury was a stick, he was 6'5" and like 150 or something. He just ran off the ground,
Yeah.
and so many things he did, he made it look so easy. I remember thinking back, I'm like, man, I don't even know how he could get off the ground, doing that. But everybody's different,
Exactly.
every
Yeah.
once in a while I'll find a kid. I just had one a week, this last week, came to me from a junior college, and she's first one I've seen in a long time, pure Fosbury off the ground, and not a stick. This girl's 5'2" or 5'3",
Oh
and
wow.
wiry, but definitely not tall and thin. And
Yeah.
he's already doing that. And I tried a couple drills and said, from shorter approach, she wouldn't do that because I don't
Right.
think you really can do that unless you're really moving quickly. So if I give her one step, she wouldn't just stand there and go like this. She would
Yeah.
try to use both arms because it's instinctive. It's like, well, I'm not going to get any lift doing this.
Right.
But when she got to full speed, that came right out. So everybody's got a different thing to work with.
Yeah, and getting trapped in those models is tricky. There's a bunch of things we could talk about here, but um, it's like there's a reason Fosbury changed the game because he did
Mm-hmm.
something different that worked for him, right? And
Yes.
so um, that doesn't happen all the time, but I've had examples when I was coaching at the high school and college level where I was like, man, you are dropping that knee drive right as soon as you take off. Like double leg swing is a bad word. We can't be double leg swinging. How do we keep that knee up? And then after a year of trying to get this kid to swing with one leg instead of two, I was just like, let's try two. And then I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to meets, having other coaches, because you've probably run into this too, going, what are you doing having your kid do this?
Yeah.
If you do this, they wouldn't be double leg swing anymore. We get back to that single leg swing. As my kid just beat their kids at the meet, with the double
Yeah.
leg swing. And you're going, but this is working. And this other
Right.
way they were jumping lower, that wasn't
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of coaches forget that the goal isn't to look pretty,
Mm-hmm.
going, oh, there isn't scorecards going, your jump was technically beautiful, you get a
Yes.
9.8. It's to clear
Right.
the bar and have it stay on the pegs. And especially in the pole vault, I can't speak for the high jump, you probably can, but I run into that a lot where they go, well, they cleared the bar, but it was a terrible, ugly jump, like, but their ugly jump cleared the bar. It doesn't matter.
And he beat your kid.
He beat your
Like you
kid,
said.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so do you run into that in the high jump too, or is it that
It's
technical?
funny that you say that because I don't know if you know the name you know of Mike Tully. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know Steve Tully. Have you ever
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
brother?
I've heard a bunch of Tully stories over the years.
The Tullys are legendary. And I grew up in Long Beach, California, and they both went to Millikan like I did. So we went to Long Beach Millikan, and Mike went to UCLA like I did, and Steve stayed local and went to Long Beach City, vaulted 18-2 there, still has the school record, and then he did some work with Telez in Houston. So I'm always trying to listen to him because I'm like a huge fan of anything that Tom Telez has ever done.
Yeah.
I've told on this podcast before, and if you're just tuning in with us here, we're on Raise the Bar with Troy Haynes, and my guest is Shawn Francis of Team Hoot Pole Vault. I brought up that before, where I was so interested in hearing anything to do, with Telez and those stories. But Steve he's a character, and but his brother Mike was equally so. I could tell you some stories that we probably can't tell here, but
Yeah, right.
he was he went to Long Beach one time. I just happened to be there, and it was after I'd been to UCLA, and I was visiting my old alma mater, and they have pole vault pits and everything. So, he came by and was doing a workout, and I remember somebody going, "That's Tully over there." I'm like, "Yeah, that's Tully." And no kidding, first vault, he comes charging down the runway and legs back and just triple snap, backflip
Oof.
crash. And I remember everybody was quiet and just watched. And he gets up, picks up the broken pieces, throws those off to the side, walks back to the bag, slides out another pole, and gets back to the end of the runway like this. And I remember going, wow, like
Yeah.
didn't even, it's like that's happened a million times, no big deal.
Yeah.
So, as far as the way things look and how they perform, yeah. That's why I got to Tully. I saw the thing that you're talking about. He had this kid, little surfer kid, long curly blonde hair, fun kid. Can't remember his name. Where he coaches at Los Alamitos High School. So I put in 3 years there recently, so I got to see him all the time. And I'd usually make a point just to go talk with him for just a few minutes. But he had this one kid that was doing what you're saying, like no knee drive, right? He would hit the box, and that right knee did not come up at all.
Yeah.
And he would rock back and do his thing. And I was talking to Tully, I'm like, there's something weird about that ball. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't
It
see
looks
it right
funky.
away because
Yeah.
I'm like, there's something different about that vault. He's like, yeah, I can't get him to do this, but he's like, he was kind of had the same thing as you. It was just like every once in a while his knee would go through, but most of the
Yeah.
time it did not. And he was just figuring out how to make it work, And it was like,
Yeah.
because that's what he had, and he had good speed, and he had the, everything else seemed pretty good, as I
Yeah.
was watching him. So yeah, in the high jump, I think I think results are more appreciated maybe in the high jump. I don't know about the aesthetics because a lot of people look, and especially when kids are bendy, I think they love looking like like my logo here.
Yeah. Yeah.
They like looking like that, but not everybody can get in that position. I wasn't super flexible. I remember Elias was like, "You stiff man, come here," and he'd like put me on the what is it the thing that swings out, the turnstile that they use to block the running lanes,
Oh,
that
yeah.
big
Yeah.
thing, right? To block lanes
Yep.
1 through 4. And it's kind of thick, like a steeple. And
Yeah.
he would just say, "You lay back on this," and I'm like, "Oh God, Elias, this is painful." He's like, "Yeah, well, you don't have a lot of that." I'm like, "Okay." So, I was like into forced yoga or whatever, but they don't always look like that. And
Yeah.
I jumped against a guy in high school named John Atkinson that I'm still trying to get on one of these podcasts. I tracked him down. I haven't been able to get him to commit, but he would jump, and he would literally, I swear to you, he would fold his arms and then stick his feet straight out, and he'd just go flying over in this sitting chair position, almost like I am the king of this event and
Yeah.
nobody can change. Because he jumped like 6'11". He still has the highest jump in Moore League, which was Long Beach Millikan, Long Beach Poly history. He went to Poly. So I got to jump against him. And, one of the guy that was in front of me, the senior in front of me, they had the rivalry. And I was kind of chasing, both of them, watching them come up. But I remember watching him going, what is he doing? And he had to jump 4 inches higher than everybody else just to make it in that position.
Yeah.
I mean,
But he
it
did.
probably wasn't like that, but that's the way my brain resees it,
Yeah.
after all this time. I'd like to have the ability to go in and grab the things that I've seen and put them onto video. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Is the way they play out in my head sometimes. Like the first time I saw Doug Nordquist run his approach in person after, seeing him on the Olympics and everything, I'd never jumped against him. He finished at Washington State right about the time I was coming into the Pac-10 at UCLA. So we never competed against each other. And then, he was a grad student and he got in 84 and on and on. So, but he's like a gazelle. This guy was 6'5", 160 maybe, and
Yeah.
fast, and he would drop into this curve where he looked like he was leaning at a 45-degree angle. And I call it buzzing the tower. I tell my kids this all the time. I go, I can't show you this because I see it this way, but I'm like, I want you to run and do your last 5 steps and then come out the other side, do another 5 and come right back out in a big hairpin turn, and I go,
Yeah.
it's just like buzzing the tower in Top Gun.
That's awesome.
And now it's starting to have some relevance for them because the new movie finally came out. So they don't have to go, what's Top Gun? Like, oh
Yeah.
God, you guys are so young. So they finally get the Top Gun reference, but it's like, I want you to buzz the tower. When I see that, it's so different than anything else. Even
Mm.
now, I don't usually see anybody running approaches like that.
Yeah. Dude, it's really cool seeing you light up when you're talking about like high jump and all these things. Is there anything else that lights you up like that? Or is like high jump been this thing that's just been
Football. I
football?
loved playing football in high school. I wanted to play for the Niners. I grew up in Northern California,
Yeah.
moved down here. So I love football. I coached football for a few years down here. I think the business aspect of football, even though I love watching pro football, the business side of it is kind of taken away from some of it for me because it can be a brutal
Yeah.
business. But at its core, the game of football itself, I
Yeah.
do get pretty lit up about that. Like, and I maybe it was the violence of it. I mean, I played
Yeah.
defense. I loved, coming up and cracking somebody as hard as I could. And
Yeah.
but this last year, watching a guy almost die on the field was kind of sobering. And it still has all those things to it. It's an unbelievable speed game and unbelievably skilled athletes, all that. So that part of it's still compelling.
What is
Now,
it what
I
is
don't
it
know
about
about
the football stuff though? Is it the same way you approach high jump, which is like the technical and how the plays are run, or how to get the speed or
yeah.
the
I
strategy of the
really
game itself?
enjoyed the chess match in
Okay,
football because
gotcha.
at the highest levels, I've got a friend at work that I call my cellmate because we're PE teachers, so we're in this crappy little office.
Yeah.
But he's the defensive coordinator of the football team, and he's really good, and he teaches his kids outrageously good tackling technique and everything else. And I said to him one day, I go, well, what about this? He runs a classic 4-4-3, 4 down linemen, 4 backers, and 3 DBs. They always stay in cover 3. I mean, it's like this milk toast, my least favorite defense of all time, because I'm that guy's going, hey, I want to blitz off the edge and I want to do this and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And Mark's just like, I'm going to sit in this vanilla defense and just kill you. You're going to catch the ball and my guys are going to all rally to the ball and hit you hard and you're going to fumble and you're not going to be able to drive the ball all the way down the field on us. And, it's 2 completely different ways of looking at things, right? Which is
Yeah.
part of what I enjoy. But he always tells me, he goes, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes, and I'm like, I go, okay, I agree with you. If you have the Jimmies and Joes, you can run whatever you want. But what if you get to the level where all the guys are Jimmies and Joes?
Right. Right.
now,
It's a
now we're in
different
a
game.
chess match, right?
Yeah.
So that's the part of it that I enjoy the most is, oh, what are they doing? That I'm always that guy going, oh, we should be running, run it right up the middle here, or, whatever. I'm the classic armchair quarterback. But
Yeah.
what was yeah,
Sorry, I interrupted you there,
I was
man,
thinking
but
golf when you
yeah.
said that. I don't get as lit up about golf, but I enjoy that now. That's kind of become my competitive thing. I don't usually get that juice to do anything. I do actually like trying other things. Like you're saying, guys come back to you and want to try the vault.
Yeah,
Like I would be probably quicker to pick up a pole than I would to go high jump
you should, man.
because yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I need to, I just turned 59 this year, but I need to get back, especially if I'm going to coach it. This is another classic question. Do you think that you need to have competed at a really high level in order to be a good coach? And
Yeah, it's a
always
good question.
interested to hear that one.
Yeah, I don't think so. I've met a lot of coaches who've never touched the event before and coached really high athletes.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think an eye and an understanding of the event is more important. Do I think if you can do the event and understand it from a physical level as well can help? Oh, 100%. But I think what's more important is just understanding the event and be able to communicate what you're seeing to try and get
Hmm.
somebody to do it. Um, One of my favorite examples, there was I won't throw her under the bus, but an elite pole vaulter that I used to jump with when I was doing the elite scene, and she was on the verge of retiring, and she was a U.S. champion, so like high quality made world championship teams. It's like, hey,
Right.
so you gonna coach after this? What are you gonna do? Are you just gonna hang up the spikes for good? She's like, I could never coach in my entire life. I don't know what I'm doing. My coach just tells me what to do and I go do it. He tells me where to hold, he tells me where to run from, he tells me what
Hmm.
weights to lift, he tells me all these things. And at the time I was going, I am the complete opposite, where I want to know
Hmm.
why are we doing these percentages and weights? Why or I wrote all my own training too. Part of the reason I went to grad school is like I want to know why all this stuff works and what my
Right.
body's doing and at the cellular level. And yeah, she just was like, I couldn't coach it. I just do what I'm told, and that's about it. And I was like, wow, but you're at this incredibly high level, and you
Hmm.
don't even think you could coach a high school kid? Like, no, there's no way I could do that. And where I have other people who have, coached state champions, NCAA champions, gotten them into these really high levels who have never one jumped at a high level, or and some of them have never even touched a pole in the first place.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think you need to do that. I just think you have to have a willingness to learn and understand, and see where your curiosity takes you at that point.
Yeah, it's the reason I bring that up is I've seen all of those things, and it's always surprising to me. But like I brought up Baru. Baru is this short little Romanian. He couldn't have been more than 5'4", and he would always wear his specs. He would wear badly matching shirts and shorts, like
Yeah.
just you'd be like, did you get dressed in the dark, coach, or what? And loafers with black socks before black socks were cool. This is in the mid early to mid 80s. And he would be like, I am the great athlete. You must beat the guy. You go over there, and I channel him all the time for the kids. It's amazing the imprint that he left on me as an athlete because he was not an athlete. You
Yeah.
looked at him and I'm like, I could not picture him long jumping, triple jumping, or high jumping over anything. you know,
Right.
maybe playing soccer. Maybe playing soccer. I could picture him doing soccer as a younger man. Part of the problem was he was older, when I met him, sure. But I just think back on the things he used to say. And he had these great mannerisms. My first year in coaching, I had just left UCLA and I was coaching at the JC level, and I had a young athlete who, I don't know if you had this experience. My first year doing that, since I was only 22 when I left UCLA, or 22 or 23. Oh no, by 80, I was 24. Okay, so this is 88. Um, fall of it, or the winter of 89 would be January when we started the track season. Anyway, we start working at this JC, and this girl that they give me is like a 5'6" jumper out of high school, 5'4" or something like that. So she's good talent. We start working. I've never coached the high jump before, and they gave me all the jumps, and I'm just, I'm doing my thing. And the thing that Elias used to do was we always did back overs, and then we'd start close and work our way out, in which I've seen the same thing in the pole vault, seen the same thing in the long jump and
Yeah.
triple. So it's not revolutionary, but that's what we did. And I started working with her. And this is one of those things, like I was too close to her in age, I think. She
Yeah.
was what, 18 or 19, and I'm 24. Like she had not 1 ounce of respect for me. And I wasn't one of those people that go, hey, I'm Troy Haynes. Like I went to UCLA and I'm number 4 on the all-time list and blah, 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 blah. Nobody cares about that. I've
No,
had my
yeah.
humbling moments already. I've told the story before. Sotomayor came here to jump right after he broke the world record, and he went to this UCLA meet. And I've got my ties to UCLA, obviously. So I got to jump in the meet. So there's Sotomayor, it's Hollis Conway, there's Brian Stanton, Lee Balkan, all these guys I've jumped against for years. Actually, all of them I had jumped against at least once. And then Sotomayor, I mean, it's like, and he just jumped 8 feet, right? So
Yeah.
there's that hype to it. And there's the fact that I get to go to it. And there's like 9 or 10 jumpers in the field. And they go, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to introduce the competitors for the high jump, These are the all-time humbling moments. So they go, here he is, Sotomayor, world champion, indoor, outdoor record holder, blah, blah, blah. And it takes 5 minutes to read all this accomplishments.
Yeah.
And he comes out and goes like this, and everybody's, and Hollis Conway, US champ, this, that, and the other thing, blah. And they're all going down the list. And they get to the end and they go, and Troy Haynes. It's like, thank you very much. I'll be here all week. It's like nobody knew who I was. So I wasn't the guy that was going to sit there and go, yeah, you haven't heard of me? I went to UCLA.
Yeah.
Nobody's heard of me. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
So, she just didn't respect me because she didn't think I knew anything about anything. So, there was a slow, grudging gaining of trust. And it took a while. The crowning moment was I was at a practice one day, and my uncle, for some reason, was at the practice. Well, we lived in Costa Mesa, so he was close by. He comes out and watches my practice, and she said something, and I go, Elizabeth, I said, you've got to, lean away from the bar as you're getting into the curve. And she goes, well, that's not what I learned, and I looked at her and I said, you must unlearn what you have learned. And my uncle started laughing because he told me later, he goes, you used Yoda on her? I'm
Yeah.
like, it was straight out. It was straight out of the movie, man. My ears dropped. It was
Yeah.
like, and I didn't even know where it was coming from. I didn't think, it just rolled out. It was like, you got to unlearn that stuff, So that it's just funny, but he was my guru, but he wouldn't have been the most athletic guy. I think of John Madden in football. Everybody said
Right.
he's
Oh yeah, he's a
an
great
okay
example.
lineman in the NFL for a couple of years, and then fantastic coach and Super Bowl champion and all that. So pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, what's interesting too is if people know it, right, and they can do the skill, and if it comes natural to them, I've kind of found that they haven't had to do the extra work of
Right.
figuring it out and solving it, right? So it's
Right.
almost like some of these, I, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but like these mid-tier athletes or these ones who
Mhm.
aren't at these high levels that had to work really hard to jump mediocre bars
Right. Right.
or performances, they'll make awesome coaches because they had to find all the ways one that didn't work, and then they had to
Right.
find the ways that did work, and
Yeah.
multiple ways probably at that point. So there's almost a little more value there sometimes. Now, if you get like an Earl Bell type person, for people who don't know who Earl Bell is, the most winningest Olympic pole vault coach of all time, right? I
Right.
guess you could say that. Very first USATF track and field club in the United States. Like
Mhm.
Earl Bell's he's the guy. But Olympian, world record holder, and then he coached American champions, Olympians,
Right.
and all that stuff. So that's the best of both worlds.
Right.
But in my world, I work with a lot of, high schools and young coaches, and that's been who I feel like they're just most fun to help, and work with.
Right.
Everyone else seems to have a coach or somebody already, but with those people, it's like what I found is the people who make the best coaches seem to be the ones who had to solve this problem on their own, and then they can bring those skills
Right.
and tools to their athletes. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Interesting.
it's an interesting perspective.
You have to have what was it? I was just doing a podcast the other day, and we were talking about. I had a friend of mine at the when I coached football, and he had gone on and played some college ball, which I never had, and he said he said had a saying which I liked, and he said, "Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard,"
Right.
and I liked that a lot. And I also told him, the flip side. I said, when talent works hard, everybody else is screwed.
Yeah.
So,
It's true. Yeah.
you got somebody who's got the gift and they have that hunger to master, not just the guy that, the coach says do this and they do it. They don't think it through or whatever. They just go and perform, which is a great gift. God, sometimes I'm like, well, I would take less of this analytical stuff and more just non-thinking jumped over 7-8 or something, but
Yeah,
yeah.
there's gifts and curses to both, though, right?
Right,
Yeah, like
absolutely.
Mondo Duplantis is probably the best example of that because when he was learning the event, he had this innate drive to just want a pole vault. I mean, he had a pit in his backyard, and his dad was a
Mm-hmm.
19-foot pole vaulter, and he was always competing against his brother, right? But he was smaller and younger and slower.
Yeah,
He was really short kid growing up, but he had that almost underdog
yeah,
feel to it where he had to learn this event with weights on his shoulders. And then all
yeah,
of a sudden he got a growth spurt and got really fast and he still had that
yeah.
underdog. So, and now he's multiple time world record holder.
Right.
And I think he's jumped over 6 meters 60 times already. And he's only
Wow.
23 years old. Like it's
That's
insane.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. I remember Buka used to break his own world record by 1 centimeter at a time, so he could get
Yeah.
paid money.
Mondo's doing that
That
too now. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember he would literally go up 1 centimeter at a time because he didn't want to do it all at once. Because every time he broke the record, they paid him money, and the old Russian deal there.
There was a thing at the World Championships last year because I guess when Bubka was around, there was an indoor world record and an outdoor world record,
Yeah,
and they got rid of the indoor world record.
yeah.
Yeah, they got rid of the indoor world record. So instead of breaking his world record at the outdoor championships last year by a centimeter, he had to break it by I think it was two or three. And he
Hmm.
was like, I just lost a lot of money having to break it a couple extra times.
Right.
Just an interesting thought. It just shows that the sport's a whole different business
Yeah.
at that level.
Oh, amazing. Well, that he was just like the other guy, the kid, the guy we grew up watching on TV on Wild World of Sports, the
Yeah.
big fat Russian dude that would do the Vasily Alexiev, the clean and jerk. He's just this
Oh yeah.
huge guy. He was another guy. He broke the world record in the clean and jerk like I think 70 times in
Wow.
his career, but he
That's
always
wild.
went up the smallest increment that you could
Yeah.
go up because
Throw an ounce on
he was
there.
getting paid, to do that. And you're like, what a great, mind to just go, okay, this the way you set the rules up. So we're gonna milk this cow for everything they've got.
Right.
Well, hey,
Yeah.
before we roll out, tell us a little bit about your the foundation and your mind and
Oh, the
that.
Owl Media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, I've had a history with mental health issues like my entire life, and was hospitalized twice. Once as a kid, once as in grad school.
Hmm.
And what helped me with the sports side was as I was learning these tools to kind of help myself out. I was going, man, a lot of these tools could probably help my athletes. So when I got back to coaching after that, I started uh, trying some of these mindfulness techniques. I started using cognitive behavioral therapy to help, with their performance, and it helped them jump higher. And I was like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, so why are these not being translated, or why are these not readily accessible? Why do you have to, and I hate to say it this way, but lose your mind or go into one of these mental health
Right.
places to be able to get these tools? So it's been kind of a mission with the pole vault side, to help grow the sport, but to help grow this other side where there's a joke that pole vault's 80% mental and the rest is in your head, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So why are we not talking about the
Right.
pole vault or the mental health side more, or the psychology of what's going on?
Hmm.
So yeah, so we've got podcasts where I talk to mental health experts and try and give them a platform, a lot like what you're doing here.
Hmm.
And yeah, just trying to grow it and give some money back to mental health projects and organizations. So
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
Well, that's yeah, such a huge thing. It's been brought to light these last couple of years with Simone Biles, in the
Yeah.
Olympics, and the tennis player, I forget her name, that won the U.S. Open at a young age, and just the pressure was something. It's so hard for I think the probably it's just human nature. I keep thinking, why is it hard for some people to have sympathy or to, you know, and it just depends, right? If they have never had any kind of history inside their family, maybe they don't have any athletes, maybe they don't have any, any experience with it. So it's just like, it doesn't make sense to them that there are these pressures, and that, just from the personal life, you're talking about those issues, and then
Yeah.
also how to perform better, right? And mindsets and how you think, and are there ways that we can learn to relax, not put so much pressure, perform at these levels, and for so many, I think that we're finally getting into an age where maybe there is a chance to, open up these doors and shed some light on these issues, and have people say, and part of that was a stigma too, right?
Yeah, for
Nobody wants
sure.
to
Yeah.
admit, that they're struggling. Nobody
Right.
wants to admit that. They just want to say, no, 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 I'm good, man. And inside you're tearing yourself apart, but on the surface, everybody's got that veneer of, I got it all under control.
Yeah, that's totally the stigma. Like the more I'm talking to these experts and reading these too thick textbooks that I'm reading, but the mind and the body work almost the same. There's this, you can train your body to run faster, jump higher, um, work in a way you want it to. And the brain is malleable just like that. Where when I was a kid, you were taught that this is your brain, this is the way it is, and it can't change. It's solid and it's a rock, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
make it more solid, but it's very fluid, and you can learn new things, you can break old habits, and you
Mm-hmm.
can challenge the way you're thinking. And emotions are a tool to teach you something. Like, what is your emotions telling you right now? Well, I'm highly stressed right now. So why are you stressed? And then you can start exploring that, and then you can use that, your body or your emotions or your thoughts, as a tool to help you go where you want to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we were talking about earlier, that's why I was really fascinated, where you're like, well, I got really amped up, and I was running really fast, but the bar wouldn't stay up. I was moving
Right.
too fast. All right, well, that's an emotion, right?
Yeah.
That's a thing happening inside of your body. So what can we do to, you have that awareness now, which is always
Right.
step one. What can we do to maybe get to that optimal level where you're still running fast, but you can move a little slower once you get into the air to clear some of these
Right.
bars?
Right.
And that's been kind of the mission, is just understanding the body, understanding the mind, and then being able to share those tools with hopefully the younger generation. If they learn it through pole vault, or they learn it through track and field, or even these podcasts, they'll have these skills and tools for if they really need it, down the
Yeah.
road, where
Yeah.
a hard breakup, or they lost a job, or a family member or
Yeah.
something like that, they go, well, when I was at the back of the runway at the state championship, and I had one attempt left, and I had these huge, crazy emotions, and I was freaking out, and I was in this flight or fight mode, and I didn't know if to stay on the runway or run or cry or whatever.
Right.
You have that tool, and then you have the same one over here as if something happened in your life. So, yeah, that's how we've been trying to tackle it.
All right. Well, that's an amazing undertaking, and I see the doors swinging open there a little bit. Similar with the Paralympic movement. I
Yeah,
I love watching the growth in that these athletes that are amazing in the fact that, you know, they don't stop being athletes just because of
right.
whatever,
Yeah,
whatever limitation. I remember watching a kid on Instagram on my feed one day, and I see him on crutches, and they're standing there by the high jump, and all of a sudden he's just like throws the crutches down, and he's got one leg is misshapen, and he's hopping on one leg all the way up to the bar, and then jumps over it. And I was just like, I'm like, first of all, that looks like it's at least 5'6" or 5'8", and secondly, wow, and third,
yeah,
wow, like I was just like blown away by
right.
that. I'm like, that you can still go out and compete and have the same drives and the same everything else. So
And that's
um,
what I love about track and field. It's you versus the bar, you versus the clock, right?
right,
Like,
right.
yeah,
Yeah. That's one thing I can say too, as a quick sidelight, when we were talking about, what motivates and this and that. I don't remember, even though I didn't talk to my other competitors that much. After the meet, I was taught you shake hands, hey, great
yeah,
job, and all that. During, I was pretty quiet. Pre, I'd say hi, check in, and then get about
yeah.
my business. But I don't remember being hateful, spiteful, or even I've got to beat this guy. or whatever.
Right.
For me, it was always that next height. Like
Yeah.
you wanted a PR. There were some heights that you would say, you know, uh, with a personal best of 222, if I went to a meet and jumped 220, okay, that's only 7.2 1/2, but that was a pretty good day. It wasn't
Right.
wasn't as good as possible, but it was a pretty good day. Now, if I jump 6'10", I'm gonna be like, well, I jumped 6'10" in high school, so that's
Yeah.
that's not such a good day. And you've got that, relativism involved. I was gonna ask you this before we go. What I've told this story before, but I can't remember one time after I jumped at a certain level, but I honestly don't. The first day you jump, you get 2 or 3 PRs because you've never done it
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
So, someone says, "Oh, you jumped this," and you don't tell them the other 4 times you PR'd that day. But those days are rare, right? But I said, it seems to me I remember in college, especially, there wasn't one time that I PR'd that I didn't know that I was going to make that bar before
Right.
I started the approach. I don't remember sitting there going, I really, 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 really hope I get over this time. It was
Yeah.
like I just remember sitting there and going, okay, that last attempt was close, or whatever was going on. You knew in your training, like there's just times when it's time, and it's like it's 7.2, 7.2 1/4, 7.2 1/2, 7.3 1/2. Those times I remember each time just going, I got it. This is it. I'm over,
Yeah.
and not being surprised, but still having that elation and run around and celebrate. But I don't remember being surprised just because, and I don't think anybody ever wants to PR with that jump where the bar comes off and flips up and down 3 times and lands and goes like
Right.
this. Like you want to clean,
Yeah. I'd rather PR
make
that way than not PR though.
right, right. That
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
That too. With that said, yeah, if I could have done that at 7.4 1/2, I would have taken it for
Yep.
sure. All right. Well, hey, Shawn, I really appreciate your time, brother. And your willingness to come right back to me. I don't always get replies, to be quite honest, on Instagram. I've asked more than a few people to be on the podcast, so I was very pleased that you so quickly answered. And with your traveling show, you go to these different high schools. You ever get out to California?
Yeah, I've been out there a few times. This summer will be a little different. My wife and I are expecting our first kid in about
Oh,
3
great!
weeks. So I don't know if I'll be
Congratulations.
doing camps this summer or not. I don't know how
Yeah,
much
you're
sleep
gonna
I'll be
be.
getting. But
No, no, I can tell
yeah.
you right now that's not gonna happen. Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm out there, I'll look you up for sure. I love what you're doing too, man. Like my with Team Hoot, it's always been how do we grow the sport more? And so when I see more podcasts coming up talking about ideas and ways to grow the sport, I'm always on board to do that. So I got to
Well,
thank you for doing what you're doing.
thank you for coming on, and thank you for being my first vaulter. I think I'm
Right on.
looking back. I don't think I've had. I tried to get Tully, like I said, and he got COVID the week we were going to do it, and then I haven't gotten back to him. And then Curran is just hard to pin down. He's always surfing or something.
That's what I was going to tell you earlier. Is like he's one of those guys who's like, "Hey, I'm not coming to pole vault practice today. The waves are too good."
Yeah.
He went
Oh
short.
yeah. Yeah. He's always been that guy. He's hilarious. He was the one who turned me on to when I was at UCLA in 82 or 83. Well, I wasn't done till 86. So somewhere in there, the movie Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure came
Yeah,
out. And
yeah,
he's like, dude, you got to see Pee Wee's. And I'm like, Pee Wee Herman, really? Because I'd seen his stand up, and I'm like, I
yeah.
wasn't a big fan of his stand up. And he goes, trust me, you got to see Pee Wee. So I watched the movie and it's one of my favorites. I still laugh all the time. And, from I meant to do that. There's all kinds
And
of little things that he would say that were from that movie. And then Strange Brew, where there's a
yeah,
part where the guy
that's a
the
good
guy
one.
offers a lady a donut and he goes, "Here, it's a jelly." And so we were talking about that line. So his nickname for me is Jelly Donut.
That's awesome.
So yeah, he's a
Hell
great
yeah,
guy. We got to get him
they're
on
the
here. But
best.
I'm pleased that you are the first, Shawn. So
Cool.
um,
Now I can hold it against Kern and Tully.
right, right. And we will be looking for great things. Keep making all those great posts, and we'll definitely get you back on here if you're willing to do this again. We'll check back in once you get a chance to settle into being a dad. You
Yeah,
bet.
sounds like a plan, man.
All right, sir.
Cool.
All right. You have a good one.
All
We'll
right,
talk
have a good one,
soon.
man.
Yep. And so we wrapped up with Shawn Francis of Team Hoot Pole Vault. Great guy, does a lot of great work on his stuff. You've heard, he's got his site on Instagram. He's got teachings on YouTube. He does camps apparently around the country where he takes his show on the road. And he's got a real great demeanor, how he, deals with his kids. You can see he just seems pretty chill, and I'm looking forward to one of these days, getting to meet him in person and sharing little tidbits. He's helping me to a great extent becoming a better pole vault coach. I didn't get a chance to tell him that, but I have been. You heard me say that I've watched his some of his teachings, and 7 drills you can do at home with a PVC pipe to become a better pole vaulter. So obviously thought through by someone who is concerned with helping others learn how to do it better, and that's the true definition of a coach. So thanks again to Shawn Francis, and we're looking forward to him becoming a dad. So until next time, that will finish our latest episode of Raise the Bar with Troy Haynes, your host, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. Until next time, keep raising that bar.